Abigail Turner was standing before a glowing slideshow screen in a sleek glass-walled conference room high above downtown Seattle. She was midway through presenting Q4 strategy, voice calm, composed and measured. A week of preparation had led to this moment. Her phone tucked beside her laptop had buzzed 3 times, already unfamiliar number, but she'd ignored it, focused on the task. The 4th buzz made her pause. She gave a brief nod to her team. "Excuse me just a moment." No one in the room suspected that when she walked out into the hallway, her entire world was about to be torn in two into a before and an after. The moment she answered the phone at 2:17 p.m., everything changed. "Mrs. Abigail Turner," a deep voice said. "This is Sergeant Carson with the Seattle Police Department. There's been an accident. Your husband, Mark Turner, didn't survive. Your daughter, Ava, is in critical condition and en route to Harborview Medical Center." The words hit like glass, shattering inside her skull. Abigail didn't remember dropping the phone. She didn't remember collapsing. When she came to her coworker, Rachel was holding her, guiding her down the elevator, calling someone, maybe an Uber, maybe her assistant. It didn't matter. She wasn't crying. She couldn't. Her mind had gone still quiet in the most terrifying way. By the time she reached the hospital, the sterile walls, the antiseptic air, and the call for Ava Turner incoming trauma room broke something loose inside her. A doctor met her with eyes both kind and clinical. There was a red light collision. A pickup truck ran it. The driver was intoxicated. Mark died instantly. Ava is in surgery now. Abigail tried to speak, tried to breathe, but the weight of those sentences pressed against her chest like a collapsing building. Mark, gone. Ava, fighting for her life. Just that morning they were in the kitchen, Mark pouring coffee, Ava spinning in her chair, mimicking a swim flip turn, bubbling with excitement over her competition. "You'll film it for me, Daddy, right?" she'd asked. Wide shot, then zoom in, Mark had promised, kissing Abigail's head as he passed. That was 8 hours ago. Now her husband was a death certificate. Now her daughter might not make it to morning. In the plastic waiting chair, hands numb and phone forgotten, Abigail sat hollow. Her life had just split open, and there was no going back. Before that devastating afternoon, Abigail's life felt like a peaceful painting, imperfect, yes, but full of warmth, hope, and the quiet contentment of a life well lived. She met Mark during their junior year at Oregon State University. Abigail was a sharp, no-nonsense finance student known for her airtight presentations. Mark, a laid-back architecture major with a calm smile and a notebook full of strange little sketches, had asked to share her study table one late night in the library. She hesitated, then nodded, and just like that, their lives intertwined. After graduation, Mark joined a structural engineering firm in Portland, while Abigail started at a large investment firm downtown. They married 3 years later on a crisp autumn day under a canopy of crimson maples. Their first house wasn't big, 3 bedrooms, a modest backyard, but it was theirs. Every morning, Mark made Abigail coffee with exactly 2 sugar cubes. She packed his lunch and always slipped in a sticky note with something silly or sweet. "Don't forget apples," or "You're the best husband in Oregon." The one thing missing was the baby they both dreamed of. Pregnancy didn't come easy. Abigail suffered 3 miscarriages in 4 years. Each loss carved a quiet ache into her bones. Mark never once blamed her. He held her through every night of sobbing, repeating softly, "We'll keep going until you say we stop." Then it happened. Ava Turner arrived early, small but strong, with her father's deep brown eyes and her mother's fierce chin. Abigail sobbed when she first held her, unable to believe the tiny human in her arms was real. Their world became that child. Mark constructed elaborate pillow forts with structural reinforcements in the living room. Abigail orchestrated Sunday pancake contests. Ava usually won with a unicorn-shaped stack, while Mark stubbornly attempted to recreate the Golden Gate Bridge in batter. Evenings were sacred. They gathered around the kitchen table for coloring games or chess. Mark taught Ava to play at 6. She beat him fair and square by 8. "She gets that brain from you," he said. But the ruthless drive, all yours. Through the joy, Abigail kept trying to maintain a relationship with her own parents, Dennis and Carol Westbrook, but it was always one-sided. They idolized her younger brother Jake. They left her college graduation early to help him move dorms. They canceled her promotion dinner for one of his basketball games. Mark noticed. At family dinners, when Abigail's mother interrupted her story to gush over Jake's dating life, or her father glanced at his watch mid-sentence, Mark would gently squeeze her hand under the table. "Your real family's right here," he'd whisper, nodding toward Ava as she colored quietly in the corner. Abigail believed that, until 2:17 p.m., when that belief in the life they built was shattered in a single phone call. Deep down, Abigail used to believe that her strained relationship with her parents, Dennis and Carol Westbrook, was just a matter of generational disconnect. She told herself that one day they would see her for who she was, not just their responsible daughter, but a strong woman, a loving wife, and a devoted mother. But the truth had always been colder than that. And it all started, or at least became undeniable, once Jake came along. Jake, 4 years younger than Abigail, was the golden boy of the Westbrook household. Even in childhood, Jake was pampered in a way that felt systematic. He was an average student, a mediocre athlete, but to their parents, he was full of untapped potential. Abigail, on the other hand, graduated with honors-earned scholarships, climbed the corporate ladder, but in her parents' eyes, she was just the hard worker. She remembered her college graduation vividly. The ceremony had just ended, graduates swarming outside for photos. Abigail turned looking for her parents, only to hear from a classmate that they'd left early to help Jake move into his dorm before dark. Her only photo from that day was taken by a stranger. No parents, no hugs, just a forced smile. 3 years later, when she was promoted to VP at her investment firm, Abigail reserved a table at a cozy Italian place. Mark wore his best suit. Ava had a pink bow in her hair. But just before dinner, her mother called Jake, scored tickets to the Trailblazers game. "We promised we'd take him." Mark was furious. "I don't get them," he said, jaw tight. "You're the one keeping it all together, and they treat you like an afterthought." Abigail had only shrugged. "I'm used to it." And she was. She had grown used to their presence only when it was convenient. Used to phone calls that revolved around Jake's business plans, Jake's love life, Jake's newest dream. She had grown used to feeling like a background character in her own family. When Ava was born, Abigail hoped that maybe her parents would connect through their granddaughter, but they rarely visited. Birthday gifts were sent, usually picked by Carol's assistant, and when they did stop by, it always circled back to Jake. Jake's thinking about launching a startup. Jake's dating the state attorney's daughter. Sometimes Abigail wondered if she vanished, would her parents notice, or would they be too busy helping Jake file a business loan? That's what family had become to her: duty, politeness, and long-standing disappointment. She didn't stop caring, but over the years she had learned to stop hoping. Instead, she built her own family, one that didn't need approval or comparisons. One filled with Sunday pancakes, bedtime stories, and whispered reassurances under the kitchen table. But then came the accident and the phone call. She had dialed her mother with shaking hands, voice already breaking. "Mark is dead. Ava is in surgery. I need you." And Carol had replied, as though reading from a script, "We're at Jake's birthday lunch. Can this wait until later tonight?" That sentence didn't just sting. It pierced something final. In that moment, Abigail saw the truth not through foggy excuses, but with startling clarity. She had never truly been a priority. Maybe never even fully loved. That Tuesday started like any other. Abigail woke at 6:15, same as always. Mark had already brewed the coffee, 2 sugar cubes, a dash of almond creamer, just how she liked it. Their mornings were quick, functional, not extravagant. But they had rhythm. They had warmth. Ava barreled down the stairs, hair messy, still half asleep but brimming with energy. "Mom, today's my swim meet. Watch me do the flip turn like Coach Nina showed us." Right there in the kitchen, barefoot on the tile, she started demonstrating the underwater twist with her arms knocking over a spoon in the process. Abigail laughed, tucking a granola bar into Ava's dolphin-shaped lunchbox and sealing it shut with practiced precision. "I wish I could come," she said, gently crouching to zip the backpack. "But I've got that quarterly review at 2. Ava's face fell a little. Mark stepped in, ruffling her hair. "I've got it covered. Wide shot for the start, zoom in for the finish. And what if I lose?" Ava teased. "Then I delete the footage and tell Mom you were robbed by biased judges." Mark winked. They all laughed, Abigail, Mark, Ava. That was their last breakfast together. At 7:45 a.m., Abigail kissed them goodbye. Mark was dropping Ava off at school, then heading to a downtown construction site he was overseeing. They had plans for dinner pizza night, reviewing the swim footage, picking a cake design for Ava's upcoming 10th birthday. But none of that would happen. At 2:00 p.m., Abigail was in the middle of presenting projections in her firm's boardroom. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She silenced it. It buzzed again and again. On the 4th buzz, something inside her stirred. She stepped out of the room, heels clicking against the hallway tile. When she answered the call, the world tilted. "Mrs. Abigail Turner." "This is Officer Grayson from Seattle PD. I'm afraid there's been a serious accident involving your husband and daughter." The rest blurred. Mark's silver Honda Civic had been struck on the driver's side by a red pickup truck that ran a red light. The driver, intoxicated, had a blood alcohol level nearly 3 times the legal limit. Mark died instantly. Ava, though properly secured in her booster seat, sustained a severe traumatic brain injury, a fractured femur, and a collapsed lung. Abigail couldn't take in the words. She collapsed to her knees in the hallway. Her phone clattered onto the tile. A receptionist came running. She remembered almost nothing of the ride to Harborview Medical Center. Her colleague Rachel drove later, telling her she'd blown through red lights. At the hospital, a nurse greeted her with urgency. "Ava Turner is in surgery now. Please come with me." Abigail followed, legs numb, eyes unblinking. She wasn't a VP in that moment. She wasn't composed or competent or calm. She was a wife who had lost her husband, and a mother terrified she might lose her only child too. Roughly an hour after Abigail arrived at Harborview's surgical waiting area, she sat alone in a stiff plastic chair, knees tucked to her chest. The fluorescent lighting above cast a sterile glow over everything, making even time feel suspended. Her phone sat in her hand, blank. No missed calls, no texts. Mark was gone. Ava was in the OR, her skull fractured, brain swelling, femur shattered. Somewhere beyond those hospital walls, the world kept turning. People were laughing, eating lunch, celebrating birthdays. At 4:12 p.m., her fingers trembling, Abigail called her mother. A part of her still believed, hoped that this moment would finally be different. That if she told them the truth, told them how bad it was they'd come running, they would be her parents. Carol picked up on the 4th ring. The background was loud music, clinking glass, cheerful voices. Someone laughed loudly. "Abigail," her mother said, "we're right in the middle of Jake's birthday lunch. Can this wait?" Abigail's voice cracked. "Mom, Mark's dead. There was an accident. Ava's in surgery. They don't know if she'll survive." There was a pause. "Oh my goodness, that's terrible," Carol said, her voice lowering slightly, but her tone stayed composed as if she were commenting on a news headline. "But we're at the restaurant. Jake's about to open his gifts. I mean, I'm sure you understand." Abigail did not understand. Her heart was breaking. Her world was unraveling, and her mother was talking about gift wrap. "We'll call you tonight, sweetheart," Carol added lightly, as though rescheduling a coffee date. "Hang in there." The call ended. Abigail didn't remember hanging up. The phone stayed in her hand, her fingers numb with shock. Her whole body felt hollowed out. An hour later, Megan, her best friend since college, burst through the ER doors. She'd seen Abigail's fragmented text message, "Mark gone. Ava. Hospital." She asked no questions. She simply sat down beside her and took her hand. That night, Megan did what Abigail's parents didn't. She called Mark's parents in Florida, booked their flights. She called Abigail's boss, requested emergency leave. She brought coffee, arranged a makeshift pillow on the bench next to Ava's ICU room. She stayed. Meanwhile, Dennis and Carol Westbrook, they didn't come, didn't cry, didn't ask for updates. They sent nothing but silence and one vague voicemail. "Let us know if things stabilize." Their absence was louder than words. The first 3 days after the accident passed like a cold, endless storm inside Abigail. She barely left Ava's side in the ICU. Only when absolutely necessary, signing paperwork, nodding numbly through medical explanations, did she step away. Words like brain swelling, medically induced coma, and intracranial pressure no longer sounded foreign. They were now part of her daily vocabulary. Every beep from the monitors felt like a test of her own heartbeat. She studied the machines like scripture. And in those brief moments when Ava's condition stabilized, Abigail quietly opened her laptop right beside the hospital bed to search for coffin options. Just 3 days earlier, they were talking about dolphin-themed birthday cakes for Ava. Now she was choosing burial arrangements for Mark. He should have been the one planning long-term, she thought bitterly. He always said, "You manage our day-to-day, I'll handle the big picture." But now the entire picture had collapsed, and she was left holding the frame alone. Mark's parents, the Turners, flew in from Florida the moment Megan called. Despite their age and Mark's father's health, they sat quietly beside Abigail at the funeral, lending their presence and support. Her own parents. They sent flowers. "And a message, Jake has an important interview. Hope you understand." The sting of that message stayed with her longer than any condolence could. She picked the casket while waiting for Ava's next brain scan. She wrote the obituary at 3 a.m., tears blurring the screen. She arranged everything alone. On the day of the funeral, Abigail left the hospital for the first time in 10 days. Megan helped her into a simple black dress, brushed her hair, and dabbed concealer beneath her sleepless eyes. "You don't have to do this today," Megan said gently. "I do," Abigail whispered. "I need to say goodbye. For both of us." The service was held at the same church where Abigail and Mark had exchanged vows. Friends, colleagues, neighbors all came sharing stories of Mark's kindness, his laugh, his unwavering honesty. Abigail stood to deliver the eulogy, voice trembling but clear. She spoke of pancake competitions, of duct tape fixes, of bedtime stories, and the warmth he carried into every room. She cried only once when she promised to tell Ava every day about her father, so that even if Ava forgot, her heart would still remember. Her parents arrived 17 minutes late. Carol wore a navy business dress. Dennis checked his watch more than once. They sat in the second pew, avoiding eye contact, then left before the final hymn, claiming Jake had a call with a potential employer. Abigail didn't stop them. She didn't expect more. That evening, she returned to the ICU and sat by Ava's bed. The room hummed with machines, steady and relentless. She reached for Ava's hand, small, still, soft, beneath the tubes, and whispered, "It's just the two of us now, sweetheart." But I'm not going anywhere. On the 14th day since the accident, Abigail had memorized every beat, blink, and pulse of the machines surrounding her daughter's hospital bed. Her mornings began at 6 a.m., a cold water splash in the restroom down the hall, stale toast from the cafeteria, and a return to the same fold-out chair beside Ava. She wasn't living, she was waiting for something, anything that might mean her daughter was still there. Dr. Lawrence, the quiet-spoken neurologist with deep-set eyes and a steady presence, had warned her early on, waking from a brain injury isn't instant. Even the smallest signs matter. A twitch, a grimace. They're all part of the process. Abigail nodded through the medical explanations, but emotionally she guarded herself. False hope was a cruel thing. Every day felt like a week. Until the morning something shifted. Nurse Sophia, the gentle night nurse who had become a kind of lifeline, was adjusting Ava's sheets when Abigail noticed it. Ava's index finger moved. Not a spasm, not a reflex. A slow, deliberate movement. Abigail bolted upright in her chair, grabbing her daughter's hand, breath caught in her throat. Then again the finger curled. Small. Intentional. Undeniable. She moved. Abigail gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Sophia rushed over, checked, then gave a small nod. "That's not nothing. I'll page Dr. Lawrence." It was the first flicker of hope Abigail had allowed herself in 2 weeks. Not a theory, not a maybe, a moment. Ava was still in there, still fighting. In the days that followed, Ava's signs of awareness increased. She grimaced at blood draws, flinched at sudden lights, blinked slowly when her name was spoken. One afternoon, Abigail sat reading from Ava's favorite book, Nancy the Backyard Detective, her voice soft, steady, more for herself than for Ava. Then she felt it, a tiny shift in her hand. 3 squeezes. Once. Twice. 3 times. Abigail froze. Her heart stuttered. "Ava, sweetheart, are you telling me something?" "Once, twice, 3 times again." A sob burst from Abigail's chest. "I love you," she whispered, pressing her daughter's small fingers against her cheek. And Ava, wordless but present, squeezed once more. 1 week after Ava first squeezed her hand, Abigail got a call from Jeffrey, her attorney, the one Megan had introduced after the crash. His voice was calm and measured as always. But this time the news carried weight. The insurance company had made a formal settlement offer. Abigail stared at the number he gave her. 7 figures. Enough to cover Ava's entire recovery, surgeries, therapies, adaptive equipment, schooling, even college. For the first time since Mark's death, she felt solid ground under her feet. Jeffrey suggested creating a medical trust. "We'll use a portion for immediate needs," he explained. "The rest will be distributed annually to ensure long-term security for Ava." Abigail agreed without hesitation. That evening she leaned over Ava's bed and whispered, "We're going to be okay, sweetheart. I'll make sure you get everything you need." Later that night her phone rang. Carol Westbrook. Abigail's gut tightened. Her parents had been absent for over a month, offering excuses about Jake's career and too much going on. Now suddenly they wanted to visit properly. "We thought it's time we talked." In person, her mother said. About Ava. And the settlement. Abigail didn't respond right away. "You can come," she said finally, "but this happens on my terms." They arrived at the hospital sharply at 1:00 p.m. Carol in full makeup and a tailored pantsuit, Dennis with a thick folder tucked under his arm. They brought Ava a stuffed bear from the gift shop. Ava looked at them, then squeezed Abigail's hand twice. No. Carol wasted no time. "Abigail, your father and I believe we should discuss the settlement. As a family." Abigail met her mother's eyes. "That money is for Ava. Her care, years of it." Of course, Carol nodded quickly, but a portion of it is for emotional distress, and Jake has a promising new business proposal. Abigail said nothing. Dennis added family supports family. A fair share would help all of us move forward. That was when Abigail saw it clearly. They weren't here for Ava. They were here for the money. Calmly, Abigail pulled out 2 photos she had placed in a folder. The first, Mark in his casket. Peaceful. Still. The second, Ava in the ICU, tubes, bandages, monitors surrounding her fragile, broken body. She laid them in front of her parents and said, "This is the loss. And every cent of that money goes toward healing this. Not for investments. Not for Jake's startup. And certainly not for people who only show up when money's on the table. The living room was quiet, heavy with unspoken tension. The teacups on the tray remained untouched, as did the plate of cookies Abigail had set out mostly out of habit, not hospitality. Carol, Dennis, and Jake sat upright on the couch like board members at a high-stakes negotiation. But this wasn't business. This was personal. Abigail re-entered the room with 2 photographs in her hand. She didn't speak immediately. She simply placed them face up on the coffee table. The first, Mark in his casket, still, peaceful, lifeless. The second, Ava in the ICU tubes in her nose, her small face bruised and swollen machines beeping around her fragile body. "This," she said, voice low and sharp, "is the cost I paid." Silence. Carol covered her mouth. Dennis looked away. Jake lowered his gaze. Abigail didn't waver. "When I called you that day begging you to come because my husband was dead and my daughter might die, you told me to wait. Because Jake was about to open birthday presents." She let the words hang for a moment, then added, "And now that there's money suddenly, I matter again." Carol's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "Abigail, we just thought, if the settlement exceeds medical expenses, maybe the rest could help Jake. You know he's been struggling." Abigail's jaw tightened. "Jake is struggling," she repeated. "Ava almost died. I lost my husband. And you're sitting here talking to me like I won the lottery." Dennis interjected, trying to salvage something. "We're not trying to be unfair. We just think a reasonable allocation." "No." Abigail's voice cut clean, ice cold. "Let me make this very simple." She pointed at the photos. "Every cent of that money will go into Ava's trust. Her surgeries, her rehab, her education, her future. There is no family portion. There is no divvying it up. There is no investment fund." She took a step forward. "In fact, if any of you had shown up for me, really shown up, maybe we wouldn't be standing here having this conversation." Carol stood, voice shaking. "Abigail, you'll regret cutting your family off." "Maybe," Abigail said quietly, her gaze steady. "But I'd rather struggle alone than let you treat my daughter's trauma like a financial opportunity." She walked to the front door and opened it wide. "Goodbye." Jake stood first. "I'm sorry, Liv," he murmured with a look that actually seemed real. "I didn't know they would take it this far." Carol and Dennis shuffled out, faces flushed, saying nothing. Jake hesitated, looked back at Abigail one last time, then followed. Abigail closed the door behind them. She leaned against the wall, heart pounding. This wasn't just a rejection of a money grab. This was the moment she severed the last cord tying her to her old idea of family. And strangely, it felt like breathing for the first time. 6 months after the final confrontation with her parents, Abigail's home no longer smelled like grief. Not because the pain had disappeared. Pain doesn't vanish. But she had learned to live with it, to breathe alongside it. It had become a part of the foundation now, an unwanted layer, but stable. Like a scar that no longer bleeds, Ava could now sit in her wheelchair on the back porch, tossing breadcrumbs to the sparrows that flocked to their yard every afternoon. She still had therapy 3 times a week, physical, speech, and cognitive. Her hands still shook when she reached. But her laughter had returned. Quiet, but steady. "Look, Mom," Ava pointed to a red cardinal on the fence. "I think Dad would have named him Sir Redbeak." Abigail smiled. "That's a good one." "Think he would have liked it." "He would have loved it," Ava whispered, leaning her head against her mother's shoulder. They didn't avoid talking about Mark. His stories lived on at dinner, during laundry folding, or while watering the plants. Abigail didn't hide her tears, but she didn't hide the laughter either. Ava needed to know her father not just through photos, but through presence. Their new life wasn't glamorous, but it had rhythm. Abigail had returned to work part-time. Her firm let her work remotely on Ava's therapy days. A nurse came in every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Mark had once dreamed of a home full of voices. That dream lived on, just differently. Every weekend, Ava's paternal grandparents flew in. They brought homemade chicken stew bedtime stories from Mark's childhood and the kind of quiet presence Abigail had never experienced from her own parents. The trust Jeffrey had set up remained solid. Every expense, medical, educational, therapeutic, was carefully managed. Abigail didn't touch a cent for herself. Every dollar was for Ava, for the journey, for the day her daughter would walk again, even if it came with a limp. And something else. She no longer felt ashamed that it was just the two of them, because in that small, fierce space there was love and strength, and a future being rebuilt from the pieces. It was late Monday evening when Abigail tucked Ava into bed after a long therapy session. As she walked back down the driveway, she noticed a pale cream envelope resting quietly in the mailbox. Return address Carol and Dennis Westbrook. Her chest tightened. She nearly set the envelope aside with the rest of the unopened notes she had ignored for weeks. But something in her, the fatigue maybe, or the silence of the house, made her open it. Inside was a small hand-drawn card, thinking of you, Ava, and a gift card to her favorite bookstore. Beneath that, folded carefully, was a handwritten letter, 4 pages in her mother's familiar script. Dear Abigail, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, but I need to try. Since the day you showed us those photos, they haven't left my mind. The letter was raw, not defensive, just honest. They had failed her by choosing a birthday over an emergency, by diminishing her pain, by reducing grief into numbers on a spreadsheet. We're not asking for forgiveness, Carol wrote, but we are asking for a chance to learn, to be better parents, better grandparents, if you and Ava allow it. Abigail folded the letter slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just sat with it. Let it settle. 3 days later, she called. No greetings, no preamble, just, Ava's birthday is next Saturday. Small party, 3 to 5. If you want to come, fine. But no talk about money, no talk about the past, only Ava. There was a long silence on the line. Then her mother replied quietly, Thank you, we'll come, on your terms. The day of Ava's birthday, the sky was clear and bright. Blue streamers fluttered in the backyard, and the picnic tables were covered in whale print tablecloths. Mark's parents arrived early, helping hang decorations. Megan brought a homemade cake. Ava's laughter echoed through the yard. At precisely 3 p.m., Carol and Dennis stepped into the backyard. Jake followed behind, holding a small gift bag. They said nothing grand, made no speeches, no whispered, "Can we talk later?" Ava looked at them from her wheelchair, her dark eyes sharp with a maturity beyond her years. I got hurt, she said softly, and Daddy died. You should have been there. Dennis knelt down slowly, knees stiff with age. You're right, he said, voice rough. We should have been. And we're sorry, Ava. She stared at him, then nodded once. Mom made ocean cake, she said. Do you want some money? It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door opening. 1 year after Mark's passing, Abigail and Ava stood quietly in front of his grave, surrounded by fresh spring flowers. Ava no longer sat in a wheelchair. She stood unsteady but upright, using a small blue walker gifted by her physical therapy team. Every step was a little shaky, but every step was hers. Abigail didn't rush her. She walked beside her just as she had for the past year, step by uncertain step through grief recovery and healing. They placed a bouquet of white daisies at the headstone. Ava reached out and ran her fingers along the carved letters. Dad would be proud of you, Mom, she said softly. You did everything. You worked, took care of me. You're really good at being a mom. Abigail laughed, her eyes already wet. We took care of each other. Remember? She looked around the cemetery. Spring had arrived, clear skies, golden light. And in that moment, Abigail felt the truth settle gently on her shoulders. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stays. It was Megan who never asked, do you need anything? She just showed up with cookies, coffee, and a warm presence. It was Mark's parents, once quiet now, pillars of strength offering unwavering love for their granddaughter. It was the nurses, doctors, and therapists who called Ava by name, knew her quirks, and celebrated every little milestone as if it were their own. And it was the two of them, Abigail and Ava, imperfect, resilient, rebuilding what had once fallen apart. Abigail didn't know what the future held. Ava might never fully recover. She might always need help. But what mattered was this: Ava was alive. She was laughing. And she was loved unconditionally. And Abigail Turner, she was no longer the woman abandoned by her parents or defined by their absence. She was a mother, a protector, a guide. Because family, she now knew with absolute clarity, isn't inherited. It's chosen. It's the ones who stay. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is who stays when everything falls apart. Abigail's story is a powerful reminder that in every life there comes a moment when you're standing at the crossroads of loss and choice. In that moment, you see clearly who truly stands beside you, not the ones who share your name, but the ones who don't walk away when you're at your weakest. Abigail lost her husband, nearly lost her daughter, and ultimately lost faith in the people she once called family. But in the darkest corners of that pain, she found something far more valuable: truth, boundaries, and a stronger version of herself. From planning a funeral alone while her daughter lay in a coma to facing her own parents when all they cared about was the money, Abigail did something most people struggle to do: